midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, and I'm a Partnerships and Community Manager here at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest onto the show, Michael Peachey. He is the VP of User Experience at RingCentral. Michael, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, how did you answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Hi, Christina. My name is Michael Peachey, he, him, and his, and thank you for asking for pronouns. Yeah, as you said, I'm currently running our global user experience and design team at RingCentral. And it's an interesting question because so I grew up in a household where my father was an academic, a scientist, biophysics, and my mother's a social worker. So I had very much like the left brain and the right brain parents. So when I was younger, I either wanted to be a writer or a scientist, and I couldn't really decide which of those ways I was going to go. So it's interesting that I've ended up in a career that always sits somewhere in between science and creativity, like the job I've got now. So maybe not exactly what I thought I was going to do, but in the same general area.
Absolutely, using that left brain and right brain, the creativity, the writing, working with a lot of folks. I always like to ask as well, how do you think your personal journey has really led you up until this point, specifically at RingCentral and leading the UX team?
hmm Well, I think again, starting with with my own background and that respect for science and that respect for service and social justice. All the jobs I've had since undergrad, I did my undergraduate degree in psychology and then an MBA from Columbia. But I've always sat in between the science and the creativity. So after graduate school, I worked at American Express for a number of years doing direct response and optimizing marketing campaigns. So I spent half my day with the creative agencies, and I spent the other half of my day with the data modelers and the credit modelers trying to figure out how to optimize everything. Then when I started getting involved in web design and internet and software, it was always about the how do you create something that matters for people, and then how do you build it, how do you measure your success, and then user experience is all about design on one hand and experimentation and measuring success on the other.
Yeah. Now, I think that's definitely interesting and I mean, I've used RingCentral in previous roles in companies and creating something that matters, but for folks that aren't familiar, how would you describe kind of RingCentral and the company as well as the employer brand for potential or current folks who are working there?
Sure. So RingCentral builds and markets products that enable people to connect and collaborate at a distance. So as you could imagine, over the last 18 months or so, we're in August 2021 now. So since March of last year, we've all been working in a variety of places in a variety of different ways. So our missions become really important. Specifically, we've got tools that let you send messages back and forth, team messaging applications, phone applications that let you make phone calls, and of course, meeting applications that let you screen share and get together and collaborate with people. As an organization, I would say that RingCentral is very much focused on this idea of connection. Um, that if people are allowed or enabled or supported in building their connections with each other, specifically in this case, their coworkers, their collaborators, the collaboration and the work and getting stuff done will happen. If you just focus on getting stuff done, or even if you just focus on collaborating, that just ends up being a lot of work. And so as an organization, we're very focused on how do we connect our customers, how do we connect the employees at our customers with each other. And then within the RingCentral organization, connection is very much a big part of what we do. I think the other piece of the RingCentral brand that is very important to me and others in leadership positions here is the focus on diversity and belonging and inclusion. once you start worrying about connecting everybody, it's only a very small step before you start worrying about connecting the people who aren't already connected or the people that have a harder time connecting. Very proud of our actual efforts, not just things that executives say, in terms of being able to bring in a diversity of viewpoints. And that ends up being super important on a user experience team. The number one success factor for design in design teams is diversity of viewpoints. We have nearly 100 people globally on this team, just shy of 70% women, majority non-white, tremendous diversity of educational backgrounds, so that when I sit in a room as a leader and ask for people for different opinions, I get 4 different opinions, and that ultimately drives our success.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely really important, especially when you're working with a global team and people are working asynchronously and you have a variety of perspectives. And you touched on this in terms of actual efforts, but can you share a little bit around kind of the actual efforts that you have seen RingCentral leadership or yourself take to really foster collaboration and inclusivity on your team or the company at large?
hmm Sure. So within, there's so many different things. We did at Ramadan a little while ago, and we've got a number of people on our team who celebrate Ramadan. We were having a conversation in one of our stand-ups one day about, oh, I'm doing this and my family and this and that. And it suddenly occurred to us as a bunch of designers that, like, wait a minute, Ramadan is all about the experience. Ramadan is all about building empathy. You fast to build empathy for people who don't have something. You give things up in order to build empathy for people who don't have things. The connection with the family and the connection with tradition. And as we went down this list, we realized, like, wow, Ramadan and user experience design are almost the same thing. This, 2,000-year-old tradition in modern UX. So we ended up putting together a big workshop for the whole organization, invited tons of people to come, and we talked about Ramadan traditions, and that was so successful. We ended up doing it for a larger group in the Bay Area to teach about those principles and then also teach about design. So it was it was an interesting mix of people in attendance. As far as building our community and our connection as a UX team, we are very much about this cadence of asynchronous and synchronous connection. So we use our team messaging, the RingCentral messaging app. For example, we do have people in all sorts of time zones. There's one team where we do our chatting, and there's kind of a 24-hour-a-day good morning thing that happens as various people come online. So no matter where you are, there's this greeting, with a little sunshine Giphy or an animated coffee cup or whatever it is, all day long, and that's our async. And then synchronously, we have this cadence of daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly real-time connections that are often not, mostly not just a debrief on I did this, I did this. It's more social connection. So the other week we all made little rock and succulent gardens and globes that people now have hanging in their offices.
I love that. I want one of those. Uh, it sounds like there are a lot of different ways that the team is staying connected and also using the RingCentral technology. And you touched on kind of the user experience also in terms of being it personalized, but also since it is a global product, you have global customers. There's got to be a way to kind of scale that as well. How do you think about creating that kind of customized experience for your customers when everyone is using kind of the tool maybe in a different way?
hmm Well, so we have this idea in design of persona. So it's really important when you're designing a product to not build something that works for you. Like if I built products that work for me, that would be great, but I'm only one person, and my particular approach, my particular viewpoints are mine. If I was in charge of how the world worked, it'd be a very different place, but it would maybe not work for everybody. So we create this idea of a persona, and a persona is a a fictionalized but based on real world evidence person. And then we use that as the person that we design for. So, if we have a persona, Marcia, Marcia is a work from home single mom. She's got a job, she's got a full time job, she's able to time shift in order to take care of family obligations. So she needs particular things in a product, like being able to turn off alerts and notifications would be very important for Marcia if she doesn't want to be disturbed during a family activity. If we have another persona, Carol, who is in the office, lives close by, works 8 to 6 in the office because she likes to be around people, wants that connection, she's got different needs than Marcia. So when we design products, we'll think like, okay, this is something that Marcia wants. Maybe Carol doesn't care, but is it getting Carol's way? And if so, how do we optimize for both of those? And then we've got a number of other personas, the administrators and things like that who work with the product. But that way we can picture in our mind and have empathy for, a connection to that fictional person we designed for.
I think that definitely makes sense in terms of personas and looking at the whole system. And you can also think about in terms of user experience related to the employee experience in terms of all the personas you have coming into the workplace as well, and kind of what fits, where there's synergy, and where we need to think about a bigger picture here. And you and I were talking before we started recording about the new kind of hybrid workplace and what that means for creating more equity in the workplace. What are some of the either changes or things that are going to stay the same in terms of what you're seeing when we move into this new kind of phase of work?
Yeah, well, to start off, and it's a great question, but I'm going to quote the great Yogi Berra when he said, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. So hybrid is something that has begun happening, and I think it's a very subtle and interesting problem. Unlike the work from home remote, which for not everybody in the world, but certainly knowledge workers who had the ability to take their jobs home, a large chunk of the workforce all got sent home, and everybody was remote, and everybody had to figure it out at the same time. And it was more or less a level playing field because everybody was at home. Everybody had to figure out a place to work. Everybody had to figure out how to get their Wi-Fi going. Everybody had to figure out how to communicate in a video meeting with little tiles. It was harder for some people, traditionally disadvantaged, who, maybe didn't have as big a house, who couldn't carve out a work area. It was harder for a lot of women. Research showed that in a traditional bi-gendered family with a woman and a man both working, it was very frequently the man who got the workspace and the woman who got the kitchen table for a variety of reasons. So there was a little unlevelness of the playing field, but it was mostly level. In the hybrid, there's going to be a huge discontinuity between those people who are on site and those people who are remote. And I think in that tension is both the opportunity and the risk of the hybrid space. On my most optimistic days, I am so excited about what we're doing and the opportunity to give Marcia, remember our work from home mother, who she's got to balance her work and the family life. And she's a stand-in for anybody. It could be a guy named Dave who's taking care of his older parents that have got dementia and need care during the day, or somebody with a new puppy, somebody with a stressful roommate. It could be anybody that's trying to balance those things. That working from someplace else really helps you optimize. So you could have a job and maintain a job and thrive in a job that you might not ordinarily be able to do. Maybe it's you live too far away from the center of town to be able to have a reasonable commute. So you don't get the job that somebody else who's a little more privileged has got because they've got a shorter commute. Well, if you can work remote, like, yay, you're participating. And that makes me really happy. Um, what I worry about on my pessimistic days are, well, what if it swings in the other direction? What happens when the people in the office are only talking to the people in the office and all the good projects go to them and the people who are remote don't have the same information, they don't get the same opportunities, and then they start to get left behind. So, you can see the possibilities of these two different futures. And then I think the question for the organizations, the questions for leaders in those organizations, and the questions for the people, the employees, is, well, how do I make sure I get the good one, not the difficult one?
And I think part of that answer as well, talking with you and other kind of leaders as well, is you have to be intentional about what you are creating here. This doesn't just happen, this melding of if people are going into the office and they're working from home. You have to really think about these two scenarios or more than two scenarios as well. And when you are kind of adjusting and creating this dynamic living strategy, people are going to have positive, negative, everything in between kinds of feedback. As a leader, how do you really encourage that, internal, external feedback
Hmm.
at RingCentral?
So I think you've got it 100% right when you say it's got to be intentional. And we talk about, like, you need to do stuff on purpose. You need to think about what you're doing and why, and what is the outcome that you want, and then measure the outcome and decide, did it work the way you wanted it to? You can't just limp along using the old rules, or I mean, you can, but you're not going to be as successful. So within the organization at RingCentral, we talk both about the responsibilities and the intentions of leaders, as well as the responsibilities and the intention of employees, individuals. Um, if leaders want to thrive in their roles, they need to get the most they can possibly get out of their team in terms of engagement and productivity.
Right.
If you've got 5 people in the office and 5 at home, and the 5 at home are only half engaged, you don't have a full team of 10. Whereas if you as a manager do a better job than me and get all 10 engaged, your team's going to thrive, you're going to thrive, your project's going to do better. But at the same time, the employee has got a huge responsibility, because really nobody cares about your success more than you do. Even if you've got the most enlightened manager in the world, it's still your job, your career, your thing that matters. And that's where the responsibility on the employee comes, to be engaged, to be intentional in what they're doing. So if you're a remote employee, what do you do every day to be engaged, to be connected to the people that are in the office, to be top of mind? And you've got to do a little bit more because you're not there. So go to meetings, be on time, turn on your video, say hi to people when they show up in the room, like nod your head and smile, like don't multitask because everybody can tell. Like, you've got to work hard to be engaged, and then you'll be part of the overall accomplishment. Likewise, if you're the person in the office, notice when people who aren't in the office are not engaged. Notice when somebody hasn't talked in a while. And stop talking yourself and say, hey, Christina, what do you think?
Yeah, engage. I think that's definitely interesting because the way you outlined it too, there's responsibility of the individual as you as the person who's interested. You're your best advocate. I definitely believe in that as well. And then you as a people manager or leader too, just setting that example and really wanting to engage and kind of check in on team members. And a lot of folks are doing some reflecting if they're working from home or, they're going into that remote or hybrid sense of what they want to do for 40 or 60 hours a week. So a lot of conversations around the great resignation and people wanting to switch jobs. In terms of you and your team, you have a lot of technical team members at RingCentral as well. What have you seen be really successful in kind of retaining, top tech folks?
I think that we'll see a theme being drawn through all of this, and it comes down to that engagement and the emotional and social connection. We on the user experience team here, like I said, we're roughly about 100. Probably 40% of those have been hired since March of 2020, so during the pandemic cycle. We've onboarded these people all over the world. Many of them have not met in person or maybe for a little lunch now that things have gotten a little better, the rest of the team. We decided early on, and I think we're very lucky at RingCentral as an organization to understand the importance of connection, those social and emotional connections. So I think while everybody was initially very worried during this big work from home experiment about loss of productivity, like, oh no, I can't see my people and they're just going to be walking around all day long in bunny slippers and not doing any work. What we really saw was that the biggest risk was burnout. And that burnout risk was mostly from disengagement, from losing that social and emotional connection. So we started, you remember we talked before about that cadence of daily, weekly connection. The daily stand-ups where maybe some business gets talked about if something is top of mind, but the most important thing is just showing up and being there and how are you, and it's just like, well, this is going on and this happened with my kids at school, and that is so meaningful for people that those meetings are very well attended and people are there on time and they often run long, but there's very little business that happens. It's all about the social connection. As leaders, finding ways to check in with your teams. We did for a while an exercise where we just asked people to put a number on their stress level. Like, where's your stress level today? I'm at a 7. Like, what was the last time it was any good? What was it? Like, oh no, I've been like a 3 lately. And then you can have the conversation, and people are really good at opening up on that conversation. Then people feel connected. Then they can go get work done. But if you try to drive their work, it doesn't work as well.
I mean, I definitely agree. And there's a ton of research around when people feel like they are connected, they are more engaged to their peers, their manager, to the great purpose of the work they're doing. Their output is just a lot better. And we're seeing so many companies look at individuals as a full kind of human outside of work as well, in terms of mental health, and the huge conversation around caretakers too. And when we talk about connectivity, it's kind of an intangible feeling as well. When you reflect on all the things we're talking about leaders doing in terms of creating kind of that sense of community and the fact that you care about your team, how do you measure the effectiveness of all these strategies? Is it kind of what you were talking about in terms of asking folks about their stress levels? How do you think about operationalizing it so you can think about improving for the future?
I The operationalizing is the really interesting part of the question in there. Can you teach somebody who doesn't have empathy the value of being connected? Or can you just teach them the behaviors, whether or not they feel it, and believe that that's going to create the outcomes that you want? I think in my experience, at least, the experiments that we've done in the world around me, people can tell the difference between a genuine connection and somebody who's doing the thing that HR said they were supposed to do. You get into some pretty fluffy things, but when you talk about mindfulness, that ability to just take a pause and think about the people around you for even 30 seconds, there's research that shows that builds empathy, that builds connection. Even if the other person's not in the room, they don't even know you're doing this, you can build that mindfulness and that actual connection to somebody else. And we all know what that connection feels like. Or hopefully we do. Hopefully we've all had a manager that clearly cared about what we were doing and why. Hopefully we've all had team members that are aligned against shared success. We know what that feels like. And I think that again, operationally, the more you talk about it, the more people like you do a podcast where these things get discussed, the more people listen to these things and talk about them with their coworkers and their friends. That's how this happens. It's not somebody publishing like the top 10 tips and tricks for engaging your team, and if you just do 3 out of the 10, you'll be fine. It comes down to that genuine connection.
Yeah, I definitely think that people can tell, even in the interview process. So you're not kind of with the team yet, whether you're being genuine or ingenuine or ticking a box as well. So I think there's definitely there's something to be said for creating that authenticity in the workplace as
Hmm.
well, and also building that trust so you can be authentic is an important piece of that as well. Another question I had for you too, based on your experience working with large teams, a lot of high growth organizations, do you have any kind of advice for people who are growing their user experience teams in terms of what they need to keep in mind for the future, as maybe they're growing from 100 to 200 to eventually 1,000 folks, where it's not sustainable to do 200 one-on-ones and create those connections in the same way?
Hmm. Well, as you scale, there's a bit of a pyramid. So, at the top of the pyramid, you may not be able to do 1,000 one-on-ones, but hopefully people's managers and directors are carrying that light of the culture throughout the organization. Um, but I think that is I talk with the leaders on the team, as I talk with their managers, uh, as I talk to the individual contributors that want to move into positions of leadership. I think circling back on the hybrid challenge, there is the thing for leaders that will make or break somebody's success. If you as a leader, I mean, presuming you're in a world where you do have a hybrid team, if you're leading a team of people that repair jet engines, they're probably all on site. There isn't any working on the jet engine from your living room. But if you have a hybrid team, and you as a leader can get 100% engagement out of your on-site and your off-site people, you are going to do better than your peers. Your team is going to outperform your peers. Your team is going to be chosen for the difficult and high visibility projects that are going to advance the people on the team, that are going to advance you, that are going to advance the entire team. Those who struggle with that, I think, are going to have a harder time. So that would be my number one piece of advice. Like, read everything you can, listen to everything you can, find a good mentor who leads a hybrid team, and go figure that part out. And then for employees, I would say, whether you're in the office or out of the office or somewhere in between, think about your experience, but also think about the experience of the others on your team who don't have that same cadence. And if you understand their experience, you're going to collaborate with them better. And just like with the teams, you're going to have better access to projects, you're going to have better access to mentors, you're going to have better access to visibility. And particularly for those early in their careers, you're going to be building those relationships that you need to be successful. So, as you said, be intentional.
Intentional, bring it back to empathy too, and also recognizing it's not Christina's world or Michael's world. Everybody has their own experiences too.
Mhm.
You need to understand that too in order to work together and really kind of collaborate and be ultimately kind of successful in what we're creating here together. I mean, we're talking about kind of your experience at RingCentral and kind of advice you have for other folks, but is there a problem or something that you're thinking about solving right now, on your team or at the company at large, or something you've been kind of noodling on for the future?
I think for as far as problems or work problems that we're trying to solve, the most interesting or challenging one is really understanding how teams and people and leaders move through the different ways that they connect and communicate. So, how does a project move from messaging about projects into team meetings on video with screen shares and demos, back into email or messaging or Slack, back into a meeting, into a phone call, watch a recording? People are constantly moving between these real-time discussions and these store and forward or asynchronous discussions. There's something really fascinating in there that I don't think anybody has solved quite yet, and it has to do with that hybrid piece. Our goal is to design a meeting product and a suite of collaboration products that are so good that you would bring them into an in-person meeting as well. So even if it was 5 people who are going to go meet in a conference room, like, what if your meeting software was so good that you invited the meeting into the conference room as well? Because you wanted the recording, you wanted the transcript, you wanted to be able to save the next steps as a video that you could then message out to the people who weren't in the meeting. I think if we get that right, all of a sudden teams and people are 20% more effective without doing any more work. And that would be the problem I'd like to solve, I guess.
I mean, that's a good one. If it's solved, you have to, to let me know about that. And I think a lot of folks are thinking about this hybrid work model as well. Is there anything that you are also on the flip side looking forward to seeing as well?
From the hybrid standpoint,
Yeah, from the hybrid standpoint and kind of in general.
yeah, I think that again, as an organization, we're very focused on this. How do people connect and collaborate? And then as a design team, we're very focused on that as well. We have seen we're a global team, and we had kind of four major centers. And if you thought about those as dots on the map, they were pretty crisp dots. What we've seen in all four of those locations over the last 18 months is people have been moving away from the center. So, for my team out here in the Bay Area, some people are within half an hour of the office. Some people are on the other side of the bay and they're an hour and a half away. We've seen the people who are half an hour away move farther out to get better housing or a cheaper place or a bigger place. And the ones that were an hour and a half away have moved out to Lake Tahoe and they're now 3 hours away because they figure they don't have to come to the office much. So how do we really embrace that group of people? And so, we've changed the way that we work in the office. We're trying to create this cadence of everybody getting together once a month for a couple days just to connect, not do work. It's not offsite, but go and meet people. And again, I think if we solve those hybrid problems on our team, we'll thrive.
I think that's definitely important. Again, bringing it back to human connection and really feeling like you belong and you're contributing to the company. I think that's something that I also look forward to as well. I know when we're creating these new mechanisms of connection and we're testing things, mistakes are bound to happen, even with the best laid plans. So not necessarily at RingCentral, maybe something you've seen in the industry or in the news at large. But are there any kind of common mistakes you see either companies or leaders making when they're really trying to create this sense of connectivity in a hybrid workplace?
Sure. So the first thing I want to touch on is that this is all experimentation for us and everybody else. I don't like thinking of a failed experiment as a mistake. It's a learning. Now, if you keep doing it, it's a mistake. But try a lot of different things. And you can try things by actually doing them. You can try things quickly and efficiently by watching somebody else do them and either copying them or not copying them, depending on their results. But as we said at the top of the discussion, the future is very hard to predict. Mm-hmm. If there were a clear, provable playbook, I'd write it. What I do know, the playbook that I do have, is trying a lot of stuff, seeing how it worked out, and doing the stuff that worked again, and avoiding the other things. So, I would really encourage everybody, leaders and employees, particularly this conversation, like, go out and do stuff. Learn, try things. Like, maybe you're a little uncomfortable with the idea of having a 15-minute daily meeting that doesn't have a work agenda that's just to get your team connected. Okay, I can understand that if you haven't done that before. Try it for a week. If it's a terrible idea, you can email me and say, you just wasted an hour and 45 minutes of my life in these 5 15-minute meetings. But if it does work for you, send me an email and say, thanks, that was great. And then I'll ask you to go tell 10 other people to do it. Like, try stuff, see what works, and do what works for you.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to your earlier point as well in terms of, and I've heard this from other leaders too, business as usual is not going to cut it anymore. You have to innovate, you have to be creative and think about, what you want to do, what the creative kind of work environment you want to foster as well. Again, being intentional. Do you have a recent, whether it's large or small, proudest moment at RingCentral where you were really kind of happy around either meeting a specific goal or just getting a piece of feedback from the team?
I think one of the things that has made me really proud of this team lately is their ability to pull together, especially over the course of this pandemic, as a team. We have a particularly successful and vibrant and healthy, low drama, high collaboration team of individuals. So the other week, for example, there had been a small group of people who had been working on a project related to one of our meeting products. And the woman who was leading the project, unfortunately, her kids got sick. They had to come out of school. She was not going to be around for like the big presentation of the work that she'd been leading this group through. So one of the other people on the team did the whole presentation in front of the executives, and it was flawless. Like, I don't think anybody other than me and the 3 or 4 people on the team had any idea that this wasn't this person's particular like thing they've been working on 100% of the time, because they were connected enough to do it. So I was very proud of the guy who did the presentation, but even more proud of the woman who was leading the project to have that trust in her team to let somebody go out there and present her work. And then like the celebration when it was done, it was accepted, was just everybody was there. They were all part of it. It was such a shared success. And for me, is the leader of the team and trying to create the culture, that's when I can sit back and go like, you know what, these guys have got it. There's nothing they can't handle at this point. And that feeling is as an executive is as good as it gets.
Great feeling and a really good example. I'm also going to use your phrase low drama, high collaboration environment. I love to see it. Michael, as we are ending the kind of our conversation today, is there anything that you want to share with our audience that maybe I didn't ask, or 1 to 2 key takeaways you hope that they take with them after listening to our episode today?
Sure. So I think that first, thank you for this, because the work that you're doing here is really important. Circling back to what we talked about, like how do people get better? Well, do experiments, either your own or listen to somebody else's stuff and then go copy it. So your work you're doing here is really important and really leverage as we try to move into this new hybrid future. So, I'm grateful for your efforts on that. I'm grateful to be a part of it. The other piece, and we've said this over and over again, it's about that connection. It's about that empathy. Understand that everybody's experience is different from yours. Even a tiny bit of trying to understand that other person's experience is super valuable, not just for them, but for you in your own success. And then the last little nuance on that is understanding that everybody's experience is different day by day. And especially as we move into a new work environment, especially as we deal with ongoing COVID issues, like maybe today was great, tomorrow might be super stressful. The day after that might get better. So just understand your experience changes, give yourself a break, understand the experience of the people around you, and I think that everybody does well.
Connection, empathy, and really understanding and creating that environment is really important. Michael, thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to speak with us. It was a pleasure having this conversation.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Of course. And as a reminder for folks who are listening, AllVoices and I really believe in creating that psychologically safe workplace through employee feedback. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.